Hi, my name is Frank Simmerjay. I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager with Trustworthy Computing at Microsoft. With me today, I have Vinny Galato, General Manager of the MMPC, the Malware Protection Center, and Tim Raines, a Director for Trustworthy Computing Communications Organization. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thanks.
Today, I think that we'd like to speak a little bit about the Security Intelligence Report, the 10th version, 10th edition of this report. Tim, is there anything you could tell us, brief us on what's in this report?
Sure, you know, this 10th volume of the report's the largest report that we've ever put out. It contains deep dives for 117 countries, plus a bunch of global data. A lot of this is trending data over the last 5-6 years. So for people trying to understand where criminals are going and the tactics, how they're evolving over time, this is a really good snapshot of that. And of course, we get the data from hundreds of millions of systems around the world and some of the internet's busiest online services like Hotmail and Bing. Internet Explorer gives us data, and of course all of the anti-malware technologies that Vinny's group actually does the research and response for.
Excellent. You know, one of the areas that I want to ask you a question about is exploits. I know we've talked about vulnerabilities. That's the fact that software has vulnerabilities. That's the thing that you can actually take advantage of. Now, the exploit is the next progression of this. Can you tell us what our trends are this time around?
Right. So, you know, when we talk about exploits, what we're really talking about is there's vulnerabilities in software, and then criminals try to take advantage of those vulnerabilities by creating software that exploits those vulnerabilities. So when we talk about exploits, that's what we mean. This Security Intelligence Report focuses on 2010, primarily the second half of that year. And what we saw in the second quarter of 2010 was just a massive spike in criminals trying to take advantage of two particular vulnerabilities in JavaScript, in Java. And so what we saw was just a big spike there. The other area that they're trying to take advantage of is HTML exploits. And so typically what they try to do is they'll create a web page, or they'll compromise a very popular web page, and they'll put these exploits on that web page, hoping that lots and lots of people visit the page. And when someone visits that page and the page gets loaded in the browser, those exploits will actually get run. And if the user is not patched for those exploits, the vulnerabilities that those exploits are trying to take advantage of, if they're not patched, the systems will become compromised. And so, as I said, we've seen a big spike in Java exploits in the second quarter of 2010, and we also saw a lot of HTML exploits also rising during that same period. And so the message here is it's very important to make sure that all of the software that you're running on your system, from all of the vendors, not just Microsoft, are kept up to date. Right.
This time around, I'd like to actually focus a little bit on the whole concept. We hear this all the time, consumerization of IT. This is such a buzzword today. Vinny, is there some insights as to what's happening in the malware space associated with this topic area?
Well, I think one of the things that we are seeing that we're beginning to see further is that the threats themselves are no longer specifically focused just in the consumer space or in the enterprise space. Now, that doesn't mean that they aren't, right? We have these things called, advanced persistent attacks, in the enterprise space, targeted attacks specifically trying to find their way into a company's network, where the consumer attacks are more focused on a generalized way in which they can get just anyone at home to be able to be infected by, a number of ways, typically through some vulnerability, let's say in a browser or in, let's say, even like Adobe Reader or, Adobe Acrobat and the like, right? But going forward, this consumerization aspect is that you and I want to take our machines from home, and we just want to have one machine. Can I take my device and just go where I need to go with it? And therefore, this consumerization aspect means that IT professionals now have to think about the fact that while I'm home, I'm working on something or I'm surfing the web, and I might have my machine get infected. I bring that machine into the network. All right, and then maybe that network then has to have some additional protection, or that machine has to have some additional protection so it doesn't get infected. Now, one of the areas in particular that we get mostly concerned about is adware, and adware numbers continue to rise this time around, both in the consumer and the enterprise space, primarily because of this consumerization aspect.
So mentioning adware, I think that there's some families that are probably emerging. I love some of the names of these packages. Can you kind of enlighten me? Give us a spin on what these packages are called.
Sure. So naming has always been pretty interesting throughout the years, and what we look to call something. Typically, we don't want to call it what the virus writer or the bad guy wants to call it, but we have to find a name that identifies it, so that the industry as a whole can line up behind it, so that when customers talk to one vendor versus another vendor, usually the name is pretty similar on what we're talking about it. So this time around, we had some pretty interesting ones. One called Porn Pop, and the other one called Click Potato. Both exploiting Java or through JavaScript. The numbers were up significantly. In one case, one was probably one of the most fastest rising pieces of AdWords that we've ever actually seen. So that's pretty important. Now, the interesting part about one versus the other is that one is typically deposited or gets to your machine because you visit a porn site that might be infected or affected through some type of exploit through an iframe or Java, right? Click Potato is not necessarily something you're going to get from a porn site, but it's an adware that might come from an installer or a package. So that's things that people need to be careful about, in that they might download something that's a good known program, but embedded inside the package that they execute on their machine is going to be one of these adware programs. And while not malicious, most people probably don't want them on their machine, because you don't want them to be pushing information out to someone that's going to be watching where it is that you go and how you surf, on the internet.
Now, a lot of times this is like a checkbox that some of these packages will incite you to click on, right, to install this package.
Yeah, absolutely. It's some would think it's harmless, and for the most part it is, but it's just part of this normal installation process that I think that people have become quite accustomed to, right, and not reading the EULA, not understanding it. And you could say, well, I didn't authorize it to put on my machine. Well, you clicked on something, or the EULA came up and you said, yes, I agree, because you just want to get this thing installed, because the program that you really want is there, but in the meantime, it's installed 3 or 4 other programs that you had no interest in putting on your box.
Click Potato and Porn Pop, right?
Yes, exactly.
Great.
Right.
So how do we protect ourselves? Like, what are some good practices that we can actually implement? Tim, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So for consumers, the Protect Your PC guidance is still just as relevant as it ever has been, right? So run a firewall, keep your system up to date, not just your Microsoft software, but all software. So Java, in this case, is very important to make sure that you're keeping Java updated, as well as run antivirus software from a company that you trust. And so, trust is a big thing here. Don't install software from sources that you don't trust. If you don't know who the company is, think twice before you install it, because you might actually be installing software that criminals are operating, or you might install software that has a bunch of vulnerabilities in it that you don't understand. And so trust is a big deal, and just making sure you think before you install software.
Vinny, any comments about that?
Well, I think the only thing I wanted to add was this is not a U.S.-centric problem or a Europe-centric problem or an Asia-centric problem.
Really?
As an example, Porn Pop was probably the #1 threat, or the #1 piece of adware that we found on machines in probably, 15, 16 different countries. So it's a global problem, and localization, I think, and again, this consumerization aspect has certainly helped. 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, localization was expensive, but I think efficiencies have been developed, throughout the community, such that, you can localize something pretty quickly. And by localizing it now, you have the ability to have that move, throughout a wide variety of, countries and languages. And so when you have it not only just in the States, but in England or in Slovenia or Germany or Singapore, Turkey, it's moving its way around, quite a bit. So people need to stay aware of the fact that it's not just a problem specifically for any one region of the world.
Right. Any additional protection ideas that we should consider for our customers, especially in the enterprise space?
Well, I think staying updated. What we are finding is that in the enterprise space, a little bit less so than the consumer space, the enterprises are a little bit better protected. They've put that defense in depth strategy in place for quite some time. Keep it updated, have to be vigilant, make sure they do the updating that Tim was talking about with all the applications.
Right.
And in the consumers, I think they just need to stay vigilant as well about it and educated.
Well, Tim, Vinny, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate this. This was a great education segment. Anyone who's interested in additional information, you can find the information at www.microsoft.com/SIR, which is Security Intelligence Report. Thank you very much for your time.